Hello and welcome to Nodes and Biscuits, a Godot game dev podcast. Today I invite Lisandro for an episode where we first talk about what working at W4 Games is like, and then we spend the rest of it looking at open source, but also Godot specific issues. Lisandro, thank you for joining me, and from the very get go, who are you and what do you do?
Okay. So basically, currently I'm working on the special projects team at W4 Games, formerly the demo team. And basically, well, I guess most of the people listening will have some idea of who we are, but otherwise, it's a company that was founded by Godot veterans, including like Juan Linietsky, the Godot founder, Raimi, the project maintainer, basically like a lot of high-profile people in Godot. And the idea is to cover basically a lot of the, let's say, corporate services, basically everything that's like too complex in whatever aspect for the foundation to cover, whether it's legal stuff like console support, or maybe just a matter of funds or mission. So that's basically what W4 does, and we have a number of services like the console support, as I mentioned, cloud services if you want to do anything involving multiplayer, like corporate support. And well, what do I do there? Because I come from basically gameplay programming mostly. So we have a small demo team that basically creates all the on the one hand the dog fooding of all our services. So it's basically okay. We are gonna create games that are gonna work. They serve several roles. So on the one hand, it's dogfooding. It's like, okay, is this API that our users gonna use that? Does it make sense? Do we have any bugs? I mean, everything. So the idea is that by the time it gets to a closed beta or whatever, we have done some sort of internal testing and iteration. So that's one thing. Another thing is, of course, that having a demo uh, that our users can have as a reference. Okay, yeah, this is like okay, I have the documentation, but I also have this open source demo that shows how it works. That shows that also shows that it works correctly and as expected. So basically, it's all of that, and of course, a bit of having something to show that's a bit more shiny, let's say, than a bunch of documentation and API calls, right? So if it's awesome that you can say, okay, we have this like super cool cloud service, but if we can show that with an amazing game, or at least a small demo that looks cool and looks fun to play, people can already see it. Oh, okay, this is interesting. I have something to already see how it works. So that's mostly what we do there. I come from basically I used to work as an illustrator and animation, but I like programming too. So I ended up working on
Doing
game
both.
design and basically, but more the prototyping type of game design because I liked actually like coding stuff, game feel. So like a very hands-on game design, not like just the more excellent number crunching part of game design that you also have. This is more like the trying stuff and see how it works. So I did that for a mobile games company, and well, eventually, after like working as a freelancer for a while, I ended up here in W4 Games.
What was the freelance experience like?
Basically, uh, Upwork, Fiverr, so those services, and it's like, okay, I'm a Godot developer. There weren't that many people back then. This is like 2019, more or less, till 2022. Basically, I was also teaching at a tech college here
Very
in
cool.
Argentina where I live. So it was like a bit of both, and it was interesting. I work for a company creating hyper casual games. I worked for several clients who were like from people who worked at big tech companies and were curious about Godot and wanted to do some personal project, small games, small apps. So a bit of everything, and then a lot of it ended up being like consultancy and classes. So uh, it ended up being like 100% teaching in the end.
Right, right.
So I had like several students, and at that time I didn't have like any more time to take on projects. So I was like that until I started working full time.
Awesome, awesome. And also from the websites that you mentioned that you were doing freelancing on or you had experience with, is there a specific platform that you would recommend?
I have a good experience with both. Fortunately,
Oh,
they
awesome.
have a very different approach. It might have changed by now. It has been a couple of years, but basically, uh, Upwork is mostly you have clients that want something done, and they will post basically, okay, I need this to be done. I need a, I don't know, Godot professional. I need a programmer, whatever. And then basically you can write to them with your proposal. Okay, this is the budget that I think we're gonna need. They can tell you, okay, I have this amount of money. Okay, I'll do it for x amount. So
Right.
then the client chooses between all the proposals, right? That's Upwork, and then there are like many details on how you work. Like you can work per hour, per project, with milestones. So have a lot of customization options. And then Fiverr, it's aimed more at what they call gigs. So basically, you you post your gigs, and for example, mine was Godot lessons. So yeah, I have like,
Ah,
okay,
okay, I see.
the
Okay.
standard is one lesson. It's this price, and it covers this depth of knowledge or questions. And then maybe the premium one is, okay, I'll help you with the general architecture of your project, and it will be like 9 hours that you can distribute in any way you like. And depending on what you choose, it already knows what details to ask you about. So it's not that you have to type everything. If you say classes, it's gonna say, okay, do you want to offer like an extra hour for this amount? How long are they? If you offer illustrations, they, okay, do you include the editable files or just the exported pngs? Are you giving ownership of the editable file to your client? So it knows a lot depending on what specifically you are offering as a game. So that's the main difference. In one, you offer your services, and in the other one, people look for you, and basically you reply to a specific project.
I see.
But
So
it also happens that,
so
yep.
they work in fundamentally different ways, but both at the end provide you with an ability to work for, well, offer your services at the end of the day, right? Right. Utilize what you're good at. What about platform fees? I don't know if that's under any kind of NDA, but is
No, not
are
really.
they both on the same level? Do they both take the same cut? What are the cuts there?
Uh, I think it was about the same. Can't remember exactly. Basically, Fiverr, I think it takes less. Is that Fiverr
Hmm.
or Upwork, I think if you work with the same clients over and over, so eventually it's like, okay, we are not really providing any service because you already know that client. And I mean, we're no longer providing that much value to you.
That's very
We
nice
have the
of them.
platform. We have the platform. The platform has many useful features, but the key value that is connecting you with clients is no longer there. So they start charging you less the more you charge your customers. So let's say like when you reach like, I don't know, $1,000, the fees become much smaller than at the beginning. For example, I remember exactly if they start at like 10% or 15%. It might have changed by now, but it was kind of like that.
Yeah, still very
And
good.
Fiverr, I think, had a fixed fee. I can't remember
Oh, a fixed
exactly.
fee. That's incredible. So it doesn't matter how high it is; they just give you a flat fee.
Yeah, my have changed.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned this
So
was 2019,
it's
2020, right? You know, it's been a while.
yeah.
They
I
could have easily
haven't
changed any of it.
yeah haven't had time to actually offer that, like time or need, honestly, to offer that in a while. I like teaching, so if I have the time, maybe I'll do it anyway. But yeah, platforms change all the time because they are competing with
Of
each other.
course,
So
they
maybe
have
I'll
to.
tell you 20%, and then you go there and it's already
You check it out;
15
it's
because
50, and you go, "What? Lisandro
yeah,
lied? Oh no! I'll have to let him know. Well,
yeah,
let's ban him." But
yeah. If I knew we were talking about this, maybe I can say, hey, can I
no,
get a
no,
promo code?
that's all. Oh yeah,
To
oh yeah.
tell
Why not?
people.
That's actually a good idea. Right, but let's come back to the demo team that you're on. So you're saying that you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of gameplay programming and game designing, the hands-on gameplay, game feel kind of game designing, where you also implemented. Are these demos open? Are all of these demos open source, or are
The
any of
ones that
them?
are
Mhm.
yeah, the ones that are not open source are usually the ones that we haven't finished yet. The idea is open sourcing as much as we can. So it takes time because for now we are a small team. So we have our game designer and project manager. We have an artist, and then I'm the programmer, and it's like a 3-person team. And then we have people from the company that also help us with different stuff. For example, for Planet Crashers, which was a multiplayer game, we have someone from the company who work on basically all the multiplayer elements. Mostly, like I focused mostly on getting the gameplay working, and he made it basically work online.
That's awesome. I need a person
I
like
mean,
that in my life.
I mean, we try to think about it from the start, so it's not like, okay, here's the game, make it work online. But near the end it was a bit like that. It was like, okay, add features. We need to get this working, and then okay, now it needs to work online. And maybe some parts of the game I wasn't thinking, okay, how is this gonna synchronize? So we have to
That's super
take a look at
fun.
it.
As if there was a checkbox for
And
multiplayer.
yeah, but fortunately, I mean, the multiplayer is not checkbox, but it's quite easy to implement
I really
with
need
the
to get
new, like,
into making a multiplayer game, really. I really need to try this out because people have been telling me that it's not as difficult as you may think. However, to get a game to a production level where it works reliably in all sorts of situations, that is still difficult, apparently.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you having a cube on 2 windows that is synchronized, that's super easy. It's basically like saying, okay, these properties synchronize them every frame, and these properties synchronize them on initialization, and that works really well, and it's really simple. But yeah, then you get to all the details. Okay, what happens if the connection is laggy and then dropping packages, or I don't know. If I have to send like very complex data, okay, maybe it's too much data that I'm sending. I have to approach the design of like my code in a different way, so that doesn't have to go over the network. So it's basically the same problems that you are going to have with any multiplayer game on any engine, but some of the problems that you would have, which is designing all the actual architecture to send and receive data, and actually synchronize the state, that
Right.
is mostly handled by the engine, and the service that we offer builds on top of that. So uh, it's basically we make a general Godot multiplayer game, and then on top of that we can add our stuff.
Right. Right. But if you can hear any weird noises, it's my dog. It's sleeping on the bed, and it's dreaming about things. Right, yeah. So about the
No problem.
multiplayer.
Same thing here.
Yeah. I'll
If you
keep.
hear banging on the door, that's the
That's the
girls.
dog. Okay, no.
No, no.
The dog is sleeping. Right, sleepwalking. Right. And in terms of these demos, right? So in terms of these demos, if you send me the links afterwards, I'll put them in the description as well. That's going to be super cool.
Sure.
One very interesting thing that I wanted to ask you about the demos as well is when you, I imagine that a really cool part and a really cool aspect of your, of what happens in your job is that if you find something, you can report it right away, right? You go through that usual route of creating an issue. For example, if it's a bug, right? You go into that. Have there been because I make games that are dominantly 3D.
Yeah.
You've made a 3D game, right?
Yeah.
I think I remember one project at least that was done in 3D. Yeah.
We made a 3D demo for Godot. It was at that point it was mostly just walking around, and we're adding some gameplay for GDC. So that's what I'm working right now. And we, before Planet Crashers, which was the second project, we were working on something that was also 3D, and that kind of got canceled. So I don't know how much can I talk about, but I'd love to have some time at some point to at least be able to show. Okay, we worked on this, and because some parts are kind of working at, I don't know, maybe we'll be able to show it at some point. I don't know.
Oh, sure. I look forward to it. Definitely let me know.
And that was with Godot 4.0, I think, beta.
Oh, exciting.
So, yeah.
You were really testing it, weren't you?
Yeah.
Really
so we
testing
were
it.
basically facing every single bug from beta. And before that, I used 4.0 alpha at Lone Wolf Technologies.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, I've encountered quite a few bugs, and I have to report.
That was bleeding edge, wasn't it?
Yeah,
really. I remember
that. Sometimes it was a bit painful,
Oh
but
yeah. I remember those days. But when you've got alphas, betas, you sort of you expect it, right? The very first version that we made of the game that we're working on now was in 4.0 beta 3, I think, and it was in 3D. I was super excited about SDFGI. So the first thing I did, I installed it, clicked the button, error spam, and go, I can live with this. So long as it looks good, I can live with this. But like you say, living on the edge with the bleeding edge versions, you encounter issues. That's fine. But I wanted to ask with the demo that you, for example, worked on for GodotCon. By the way, great talk. I think you were showing it, weren't you, together with your colleague?
Yeah. That was Fer, the project manager and game designer, and me.
Nice. Yeah. Were there any specific workflow issues that you found between Blender and Godot that you identified, and then you either found a way of working around them? This is a common question also on Reddit that I find when there are people working with Blender and Godot. They very often ask, what's the best way of working with models? So what was your workflow there?
Yeah, I don't know if ours was the best, but it was what we had. Basically, we had an old scene that was from a very old project that our 3D artist was working for Godot, and that was like a huge, very detailed castle. And initially, we were going to do something else, like something from scratch. And then, like, we tried to when we were like analyzing the scope, and the time we had is okay. We're probably not gonna make it in time if we have to make everything from scratch. We have this pretty nice looking scene, so we can use that. And the issue we had with that is that it was like a monolithic giant Blender file. basically.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
it also was created a long time ago, so the artist had learned a lot by that time, and so it was a lot of time was spent on like cleaning up a lot of stuff as much as as we could. um, and yeah, that workflow, what we found out is, for example, when Blender exports as gltf files, the problem that you have is if you have anything with modifiers, so like you have a mesh like a column, and you have that column repeated 100 times,
Mm-hmm.
but you have some modifier applied. I think in our case was something like weighted normals, right?
Okay.
So if you don't apply that modifier, you get a mesh without the modifier. It's not what you want. You want the mesh that you're seeing in Blender. You want that,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So if you apply the modifier, there is an issue reported in the Blender exporter. It cannot tell that it's the same mesh. Like it says, okay, I have this mesh and I will apply the modifier. It will create a new mesh. I will save it as mesh one. Then I see exactly the same mesh, but I'm not really sure if it's going to result in exactly the same, even though everything is the same. But it doesn't check. It doesn't, because it's not as trivial as it sounds. It would have to check, okay, does it have exactly the same modifier stack with exactly the same values? Because that's not something you, when you create like link duplicate, that is not linked, or the
Mm-hmm.
modifier stack. So we
Mm-hmm.
could have different values or a different order of modifiers, or whatever. So it's
Wow.
not that easy to know if they're exactly the same.
Okay.
So basically, you have mesh 2, mesh 3, 4, 5. So you have 100 meshes that are exactly the same vertices, exactly the same mesh 100 times. And then you have to load that in memory.
Right, but
So
are all of those meshes joined into a single mesh with a lot of geometry, or are they imported as separate objects?
they are imported as separate objects. We also needed
No way.
that if we,
Really?
yeah.
Does this still happen? Because I sometimes still use modifiers in my Blender scenes, and that seems. I think I apply all of my array modifiers already in Blender. Okay, never
I
mind.
mean, you can, yeah, you can fuse them, but in our case, we didn't them separate because we also wanted to do LOD, and so we wanted that as separate meshes,
Absolutely.
but we don't
Cool.
want it duplicate meshes. So what
Yes.
most people do in those cases is like either if you can, you fuse them all together as you said. But in that case, anyway, you end up with the duplicated vertices because you have the same mesh, the same column, like repeated in the same building. That maybe it's only one giant mesh, but you have tons of vertices that are essentially the same. And if you could have exactly the same mesh, the same reference to the same mesh, you can also tell the renderer to batch that automatically. Because in
Yes.
Godot 4, you don't need to create a multi-mesh instance. If you have exactly the same mesh, it already batches that. It's kind of smart in that way. So
That's a very
something that
important information, by the way. Is there anything special you need to do to set that up, or does Godot do it automatically that when anything references the same mesh, it just batches it?
I don't know I don't know the details, but I think it's
Mm.
like if you create a scene and you duplicate that, and it has a mesh instance, and that mesh instance is basically contains exactly the same, like it's the same mesh with the same materials. I think that gets batched as if you were
Awesome.
creating a basically a multi-mesh instance. So basically, we created a script that we did several iterations of how to automate that on an import script. So after the scene is imported in Blender, we can evaluate that mesh information. What I ended up doing is basically hashing the mesh data and then like building a dictionary of scene meshes. So, okay, I've already seen a mesh that hashes to exactly the same thing. And I were like 2,000 meshes, and it took 3 seconds or 6 seconds on import only. So for me,
That's actually
it
super
was
good. Wow. That's
good.
fast.
It was good enough, right? I mean, if that were on runtime, it would be super slow. But I don't care. I mean, actually importing the GLTF file took much longer than that. So,
Yeah.
uh,
3 seconds is nothing.
so that worked well, and there are some improvements that can be added, but it worked well. Um, and the other thing that we wanted to add, we didn't get to actually use it in time. I got it working in time for GodotCon, like the very last day, just in time for the talk.
I'm very happy you did.
Was Yeah, was basically you know how when you use Blender with Godot, you have these import hints that you can add to the name of your Blender nodes.
Oh, I
So you
love
can say
those.
like,
Yes.
you can say like, okay, convert this into like a static body and add a collider, whatever, or this is a collider, or don't import all this section, etc. And those are like suffixes you add to the name of the
Yep.
node. So that's fine for simple stuff, but you cannot put a database inside a name, right?
Right.
So what if you wanted to automate a bit more and do some custom stuff for your game? Like, I don't know, for example, you want the in our case, our workflow was very art driven. So it's not like maybe like an FPS where you would create a library of meshes and then you would build everything inside the engine. This is more like what you would do for I don't know, maybe like a walking simulator where art direction has a lot of control and you don't really care about one thing being here and there, but you want the artist to be able to see stuff in context. So it was really important for us that Ferrer 3D artist could work in the app that he felt comfortable with, and that was Blender. So I wanted him to be able to build the level in Blender, and then we just import it as a single file. So we thought, well, what if we want more? What if we want for example, I don't know, like being able to define what sound footsteps make depending on the material, and what if we want to define that in Blender, or what if we want to say, okay, this file replace it by like this mesh, replace it by an instance of scene XYZ, which is breakable, or something like that, right? Because usually you have a person that does that by hand, like goes, okay, I have to replace this, I have to replace that, okay, here I have to put some particles. So you have to do all that in engine. It's like, how can we automate that for Blender? And maybe people say, no, it's an awful workflow, and maybe some people will say, yeah, I could work with something like that. You have very different developers. Like, some are more art inclined and would love something like that. Some people do everything in code, and basically like you open the Godot project and it's like an empty scene with a giant script. Very different people with very different needs. So it's like, okay, let's see if it works. And it was very painful to get that working. There were a number of edge cases, but basically what we did is you have the custom properties in Blender. So for every node, or almost every data type in Blender, anything you can click on basically has in its properties, you have it right at the very end, you have custom properties. And that's basically a key value store. You type a name for a property and you can say, okay, it's a Boolean, it's an integer, it's a float, it's a string.
So like a
And that's
dictionary.
it's
Right.
just it is exactly that. So if you check the GLTF file, it's a JSON dictionary.
Mm,
And that's it. And I
that's
said, okay,
awesome.
well, Godot has metadata. So it has the like if you don't need a script and if you just want to store some data in a node, or I think it works at the object level. If you want to store some extra data and you don't want to create a script and an export properties just for that, you can use like set meta, get meta,
Super
and you have the
useful. Set
same.
meta is super useful. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's basically the same functionality because you have a key value store.
absolutely.
And I say, okay, that looks very similar. Blender has nodes, Godot has nodes, so can we make it work like that? And yeah, it was basically creating an GLTF importer extension, or something like that. It's calling in Godot, and making it basically translate those GLTF extras into Godot metadata.
That's
As I said,
awesome.
with some with some edge cases, and I mean, it was not perfect, but now there is someone actually working on a PR to have that as a built-in feature in the engine. And of course, there is always like those long discussions of, okay, what's the best way to do it? And, do we include this? Do we include that? What about this and that? So basically, all that I had to deal with and more. To get it working in the editor. I don't know. I hope it gets accepted and merged, because I think that can be useful for many people.
No, that is super useful. When I imagine that I could. Okay, so this is a two split problem for me. First of all, if I imagine that I could define, right, I make 3D games, so using 3D objects from Blender or being able to define more in Blender is fantastic, right? Because it means that I can create infrastructure in the game engine that, makes use of this metadata. But the other issue is that I would find this more useful if I am working in a Blender file with multiple objects. But working, for me anyway, working with Blender files where there are multiple objects is a bit painful. Because if I want to drag out a mesh, use it somewhere else, it gets disconnected, it gets duplicated. If I want to use just a specific thing from this Blender file somewhere else, again, it's a bit cumbersome. So if both of these things were solved
Yeah.
somehow, I'd be in heaven.
Well, one nice thing about the actual PR to have this in the engine is that the person that implemented thought, okay, if we have import, we should have export too, because Godot does export. You can take a Godot scene and like you can do some blocking for level and export that as a GLTF file, and you can have your artist work on that. So Blender also has automation tools. You can use Python to automate stuff in Blender. So what if we could add Godot node metadata? What if we could do it the other way around? Turn that into custom properties in Blender. So maybe you can create some scripts for your 3D artist, and it can automate stuff. Right?
No,
So you can tag stuff in Godot, and that becomes automagic stuff in Blender, basically.
No, sure. I still think that the most useful thing is going to be Blender to Godot, but I do see the use case that you're describing here. Also, in the future, I would love for there to be some sort of a direct link, like a real-time direct link that you can open up a. Can you imagine this? You imagine that you open a Blender file in Blender and you can see it updating real time in Godot. And and then geometry nodes, for example, if this was combined geometry nodes and you could be running all of that and in real time it updates in Godot, that'd be wild. I've only seen one prototype where someone did this. There was a link between Unity and Maya, and they built a tool between Unity and Maya, and as you were editing a model in Maya, Autodesk Maya, it was updating it real time in Unity, and it looked super good. But yeah, I don't know how useful it is. To me, it just looks super fancy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, everything that makes iteration faster, for me, it's the way to go. I mean, that sounds complex because you cannot re-export the whole thing. Like for a small file, it could work. For a big file, exporting as GLTF, then importing to Godot as a scene, it takes a while. So it has to be some direct communication, like Blender telling Godot, I moved this, and Godot, okay, I know what you moved, and I will move it on my end.
But for that, there needs to be a robust system, right, that can communicate this way. And a super interesting thing you mentioned there about iteration time. I think that you hit the nail on the head there, because the iteration speed basically means that you're removing paper cuts, right? Those little small things that take your time away. One of those things, again, since we're talking so much about 3D, in 3D is when I've got a Blender file, it's got multiple meshes, and I am perfectly fine with working with that one bigger Blender file, and I want to save them separately. You need to go into the asset importer window and then say, yes, save this mesh externally. define the path. And then every time you click define the path, it doesn't remember the folder. You have to go back to the same folder
Yeah.
again. Yeah, and this gets a bit cumbersome. If just this process, this one process was made easier, the iteration time would just increase immediately there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a lot of basically usability rough edges. I think both in Blender and in Godot.
I
And
agree.
I think it's mostly like you have. I think we were discussing this privately,
Oh, go
but
for
you
it.
know, like
Yes.
as I said, in open source, like you have a majority of engineers. It's mostly like programmers that think, okay, I'm going to make something cool, and they end up being the majority of the project. So you know, it's like artists or people from other fields don't get involved as often. It's like very dominated by engineers. Everything that's open source, and sometimes you can feel that because yeah, you have some nowadays maybe an amazing engineer that can code a feature in the best way, will be performant, it will be super flexible, but they are not necessarily the person that knows how to expose that to the users, or they maybe don't know exactly. I mean, of course, they don't know exactly how it's going to be used, but maybe they don't have that much experience needing to use that feature, like using that as a user. They have experience building that kind of stuff, you know.
I
um
love this point
so
of view, by the way. Love it. Yeah.
so, it's what you say. I an anecdote that I always remember is do you know, well, I think it's still there, you know, about the Opera browser?
Yes.
Well, basically, Opera had tabs from, like, I think before anyone else, and basically at some point they decided. So basically, you could, if you had empty space, you could right click, and you had a context menu to click on a new tab, like on every other browser, and they decided, okay, what if you have a lot of tabs open, you don't have any more empty space? Okay, we'll add like a couple pixels at the very top of the window, and you can always click there to have a context menu. And that sounded super nice. But the problem is, usually what you want to do when you want to close a tab, like you flick your mouse, let it basically hit the wall, basically hit the edge of the screen, and you know it's gonna be there, and you can always like right click or do whatever. So now you had to like be very careful to stop your mouse before it reached that part. Otherwise, you won't be clicking on the tab. You will be clicking on that like tiny bit of title bar. So instead of dragging the tab around, you will be dragging the whole window, and it's such tiny change. But and it's maybe so hard to visualize it if you don't,
Absolutely.
if you're not
It
a
sounds
user.
great on paper. It sounds fantastic on paper.
Yeah.
It solves the issue, and it's a design solution that causes a minimal change. But yeah, just like you say, unless you're the user, unless you've seen someone use it, it can be hard to imagine exactly what's going to happen. Fantastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So would you say that this is something that happens often dominantly in open source?
I think happens more often in open source because,
Hmm.
as I say, you have a majority of engineers, and you don't often have like UX UI people, like dedicated people. And software is usually thought of as more as tools than experiences and products. It's like useful tools. It's more like a tools that you use to build your stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
While
yeah, yeah.
companies, since they have a pressure to basically sell, they are always thinking in, okay, what's the experience gonna be? Like if you think of Apple, they are always like thinking, how is it gonna feel to the user? And you might like it or you might hate it. Like sometimes I really hate some decisions that Apple makes. Uh, but
100%.
I
Yeah.
think that Jobs got that part right. That people really care about data. How does it feel when I use the software? How does it the tasks that I do often, are they easy to do? Like, does the app reduce friction in every possible way? Is it thought that way? That does it take into account what are the most like the hot paths for the user? Because programmers can think about that. It's like, okay, I have this software, I had to make it performant, so this is the nice clean way that everything should be arranged. But I know that this way is not as clean, but it will be faster because I take into account that most of the time this will take a lot of
Yeah.
computing power. Well, but you have to think about the same thing for the user. It's like, okay, yeah, this is the really beautiful taxonomy of how you can lay out your user interface, but maybe it's not taking into account what people do with the software most often. So if I do something all the time, I don't want to have to be moving the mouse all around the screen, clicking on menus and submenus. And that's what you said about, okay, I have to set the path every time. It doesn't remember the last used folders, and that, like, really small things that change the experience a lot. If I think I had the same issue with, what was it? Um, yeah, animated sprites. You know that the animated sprites, you can have a sprite sheet, and
Yep.
it's like a 4x2 sprite sheet, and it wouldn't remember. Like, if I open the same sprite sheet, it wouldn't remember. It would always say 4x4, and that made me mad because, like,
Oh, I can imagine. Must have.
usually, like, why 4x4? Like, why 4? Like, could be any number. So why not, like, give me one by one? So when I have like a strip of frames, like all horizontal or all vertical, which is also common, I only have to modify one number. So no, you have to, like, if you have 4 in a row, you have to remove one of the numbers and then fix the other. Uh,
Oh, that's a
and
paper cut
it's
right
such
there.
a,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
that's
little thing,
such
but
a
it's
tiny
every
change.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's the sum of all those tiny things that can make or break the
Oh,
experience. And
absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
really hard to
You know,
fix this.
this really makes me remember that one quote from an English writer, an older one, who said, "Excuse the length of this letter. I didn't have enough time to make it short." Wh- wh- right? Where so I love that idea, and to me that quote is what UX is. If you have enough, if you spend enough time and you put in the effort to try to understand what this letter
Mm.
or your application is trying to achieve, you are capable of delivering the end result with smaller amount of necessary effort from the user to achieve the same result. So we we all know this. We can write essays that are super long and say nothing, and then at the same time you can write 2 sentences that deliver a lot of information. Just like in menus, you can create 7 menus that do the same thing, where you have to go from a menu to a submenu to a submenu to a submenu to a pop-up window to a button, or it can be just a single list of icons. One such change, and I basically completely agree with everything you just said here, and I love it really. One such change that I remember was, do you remember how the anchors menu changed from 3.x to 4.x? Do you remember that
Yeah,
difference?
yeah,
Yeah, I remember that as well, and that to me was such a lovely UX advancement. Right, it's so much easier to find the one that you're looking for. It makes contextual sense. You know, top right corner is in the top right corner. Finally, before that, it was a vertical list of basically identical looking icons. It took a, yeah, that was a thing.
yeah. And another thing I noticed is that usually, like, when you're working on a feature, uh, it's very common that your implementation details end up bubbling up all the way to basically the API and the user interface. Like, if you know how it works internally, and it's usually easier to make it in a certain way because the code to make it work is not that hard. It's simpler. So that ends up, if you also do the user interface for your feature, uh, that's a really common problem. So sometimes you have to, like, okay, you prototype it, you know that it works, you know what it's gonna do, but then you have to look at it from the other side. It's like, okay, I'm a user that has never used that feature. I have no idea how it works. Don't expect people to read the documentation.
Oh, yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
that's like the crutch if you cannot get it to work right intuitively. So it's like, okay, I find this. What am I gonna do? What do I want to do? What's comfortable to me to do? And then after trying to imagine that, using the feature a bit, it's like, okay, so the experience has to be a bit different, and you might need like the code might be harder to implement, because you have like a lot more edge cases, because you're thinking on more on the, like, okay, the user wants to be able to do this. Oh, it's not that easy. It was easier if I have them, like, I don't know, type a number and press enter, and then
Best solution ever.
no, they want to like drag and drop, and while they are dragging, they want to preview the result or something like that. I'm saying something like very abstract, but you get the idea. It's
Absolutely.
like
That's
making it work
100%
in a,
correct what I want to do. Yes.
yeah, it's much harder to code, but in the end, you get what the user, what makes the user more productive,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, okay. Here's the thing, and I'm actually super. I just remembered one proposal from the Godot, a Godot improvements proposal repository. So, for anyone who doesn't know, Godot has a repo online called the Godot improvement proposals, where anyone can post a proposal that they have an idea for. If they have an implementation in mind, they can create an issue already that's got a template. If you do not have an implementation in mind, you can start a discussion around it so that someone can come in with an implementation and create that issue, and then from that a PR can be created if there is enough support. Now, a very interesting one that I remember, and I'm so curious what your point of view on this one is going to be, Lisandro. What do you think about moving any panel anywhere? What's your take on this one?
I don't know. I guess, I mean, as a user, that would be like super super cool. I don't know how easy it is to make it work in a nice way. Like, for example, the inspector assumes that it's going to be vertical. Like, everything is arranged in that way, the property inspector. So if you put it at the bottom, how does it work? Does it have to create several columns? Like, what's the layout? It now has to, like, adapt to
Well,
different.
well,
So you can make it work, but it's a lot more work. So I don't
I
know what
wouldn't
you
I
what
wouldn't
you
even
say.
I wouldn't even think about it that way. I would just think about it from the perspective of it doesn't do anything extra. It just lets you put any tab and put it anywhere. Just like that. Right? Because for example, imagine you have a vertical monitor. You have like a so for
Yeah.
example, I have an ultra wide. If I put my ultra wide vertically, I'd have a shit ton of vertical space available to me, right? And I could do a lot of,
Okay.
horizontally placed tabs that should require um, more vertical space, and I could still do that on a monitor like this. Yeah.
I think what the contributors are gonna say about that is that they're gonna think, okay, how many people, like, how much of our user base will do that, and how much time and effort is that uh, gonna cost us, and like, who's gonna maintain that new feature, because down the line we might need to maintain that. So I guess that's why, like, a lot of proposals, like, get shut down,
I
because
completely
in the
understand
end,
this. I completely understand that.
like,
Yes.
you have like hundreds of people, uh, like, having ideas. and some of those ideas are really good, but sometimes it's really hard to accommodate everyone, and you have a small pool of people that are the ones that are usually working on the editor, because it's also easy to say, okay, I have this PR, I have this feature that works great, and then they say, oh, that's awesome, yeah, that's really good, and then you disappear. So
Yeah,
they
and who's
have
going
this
to
new
maintain
feature,
it
and no one,
afterwards?
yeah, who's going
Well,
to
but
because, oh,
still,
I
I
got
mean,
bored. It was fun making it, implementing it, but now maintaining it, that's really boring. It's a
yeah.
pain. It's a
Now
pain. So now
imagine that you make a feature, that you implement something in a way that decreases the amount of maintaining that you need to do in the future, right?
yeah,
N-
yeah,
Now,
100%
I
for
imagine
that.
that's ideal, and I don't know if that's ever possible, because sometimes it seems like with the growth of software, it does become possible, but only after a certain amount of refactoring, where you move enough systems around to accommodate for that. But regardless, yeah. So as a user, though, would you welcome that you can move any tab anywhere?
Yeah, sure. Sure. I don't know
Me
how
too.
how much I would use it, but yeah, sometimes and working on small screens,
Oh,
I like
absolutely.
find it difficult
You
to
know,
okay, why is this on the
let
bottom?
me give you.
I would prefer that panel to be on some other place that can be. Now we
That's the
have
thing.
floating panels. That's also good. So yeah,
Fantastic. Yes. One thing that immediately strikes me as a thing that personally I would do right away is I would move all of the panels from the bottom to the side, because again, I have an ultra wide. But you know, the console where it prints out your prints and whatnot, whatever is happening. I would definitely put that on the side, because I always have my game window set as top level, so that I can be changing things in the inspector as my game is running. And I often have to move the window around specifically just to see the console at the
yeah.
bottom. And if I could move it to the side, I'd just leave it there forever. Forever.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a single monitor now, but I used to work with two, and I had like the game running on one and the editor running on the other, and that's much painless experience. But you don't always have
No.
that option, right? You might be on your on a notebook, you might be I don't know, on the go, and yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you have options, that's great. And yeah, the console is like super tiny basically, and you have to scroll, like if you get a like if you start printing like crazy, you have to scroll, and
It's
you, yeah,
gone.
like I don't
It's
know,
gone.
like
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
most 10 lines that you can see.
No, yeah.
uh
And also, the wider your monitor, the more space you're wasting, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
theoretically you should be getting more
well,
space, but you never
you can
print
print really
lines
long.
and lines. Yeah.
You can print really long stuff.
Yeah, print all of the objects in the game now.
Yeah, yeah, you printed like a huge dictionary. You can print like the property info dictionary that is usually huge and
Yeah.
probably will fit in
Oh,
one screen.
wonderful. And then my teammates ask me, why are you doing that? I go, because I can.
Yeah.
I have an ultra wide. Why couldn't I print the properties? What's wrong with you? Why are you asking such questions? Yeah. So if this became possible, this is definitely a thing I would do. In fact, if there was an add-on, and you know what, anyone listening, if you feel like making this add-on, if you wish to put a smile on my face, definitely do this, where you just put the console on the side. That'd be awesome. I'd like that. It'd be
Might
very
be
nice.
possible because now we have the dock that couldn't be moved to the bottom dock, and now you can. I think in 4.3 you can have sorry, the file system dock.
File
Now you can
system
have it.
dock. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you can have it on the bottom. So maybe
Yeah.
you'll be able to move the console. Like why not?
Yeah, it's super weird though when I think about it, because there are different kinds of panels, right? There are panels that you can move, there are panels you can detach, and then there are panels that are always at the bottom, and then there are panels or tabs of the editor that you can also put in the dock or remove from the dock. So it feels like there are three categories now. But yeah,
Yeah,
the file
that's
system was
probably
introduced.
I mean, Godot is actually much older than it looks. So it's not from the time it was open source. It's like I think like almost 10 years older than that. It's from 2000. Don't know, 7. I mean, I remember Juan Linietsky, one of the founders, posting screenshots in a forum here in Argentina. Like, I'm creating a game engine, and it's gonna be better than everything out there. I don't know. Like, I think no one knew about Unity back then. Probably
Interesting.
Unity was already there, but it was not like as hugely popular as it is right now. Unreal was not a thing like downloading Unreal. No, you had to pay millions for that. So there were a lot of like small 3D engines, and yeah, something that grew over many years. There are probably a lot of just legacy stuff. Like it made sense at the time, and
That's understandable. Yeah.
it was never painful enough that
Hmm.
that they needed to change it. And now uh, the project is big enough that they can think, okay, yeah, maybe we can take the effort to do things like that seem so simple, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it
yeah,
looks
yeah.
simple.
Look, exactly what you said. It made sense when it was being put in, right?
Yeah, but
It
sometimes
didn't
like
make sense to
it's
change it
super hard to
afterwards,
do.
but then the
Yeah,
project grows bigger. And suddenly it
yeah,
would be good to change this, but at the
yeah,
same time, it's
yeah.
a bit of a legacy thing. There's some tech debt. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's just not worth
Or
it anymore to go
sometimes
back into it.
I think it happens that it actually like it might be hard to do because of some tech debt, or it might be actually possible, and like no one noticed. Like, wait, we can do this now.
Oh, look.
Let,
Oh,
let's
my.
let's do
You
it. That
just.
happens too.
You just
That
reminded
happens
me.
too.
I fixed a bug in the engine that was just like this, by the way. So there was this super weird bug. It was a super weird bug. Okay, so there was a super weird bug. When I started using Godot, this was also 2018. I started using Godot in 2018. From 2018, from the first time I started using it, there was something wrong with the 3D scale gizmo, right?
Mhm.
I had complained about it on Discord, various places. The response I usually got was, "Why are you using the gizmo? Why don't you just change the numbers directly in the inspector?" I was like, "Come on, guys, you can't be serious." But they were, and
Well, that's what I tell you about like engineers
yeah, yeah.
versus people from other field. Like
so
for
so
for
I
them, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make complete sense until you are there as a user with 20 objects that you need to change the scale of, and the gizmo actually speeds up your workflow, of course.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I keep on using it for a couple of years. I become better at GTscript. After I become better at GTscript, take a look at the source code, right? And I notice that in the source code there was this issue that, what was it? Oh yes, I remember. The gizmo, when you start scaling, when you started scaling a 3D object back then, the gizmo was not taking into account the distance of the mouse from the origin of the object.
I see.
Right? So the steps were always the same. And then if you had a big object, the steps kept on increasing incrementally, infinitely. So the bigger the object, the bigger it scaled all the time. It didn't just matter. So I just put in this little improvement. It was a single line. Also, many mistakes I made in the C++ code. I had people comment on it and help me make it actually good and actually usable. But basically, it took into consideration the size and the distance of the mouse from the origin of the scaling, and that worked like magic, right? And it was just back then I used to joke that I am one of the only 3D users of the engine, because there is no way no one noticed this issue if they had actually used it.
Yeah, but you have to notice it. You have to think about what might be wrong. And I mean, once you showed that, like maybe everyone reading that was like, oh yeah, obviously that's a way to fix it. And of course, you have people that maybe can do the same fix in a much cleaner way with much more experience with C++. But you noticed like what had to be done, like what was wrong with the algorithm, basically what was wrong with the approach. And sometimes the most obvious way to do it that doesn't work, so you have to take into account like some extra stuff, like what you did. I worked um, with mobile games, as I told you, and those were mobile games for for small children, and we also had to consider a lot of stuff like for example, okay, it's a kid, it doesn't have fine motor skills, the screen might be really small, so when you consider, for example, you have an item and you have to make the area where it will detect your finger to do drag and drop. And so I worked on the prototypes using Godot, and then we had the production team basically implementing that in Unity. The whole project was in
Oh, I
Unity,
like that
but
workflow. That's nice.
yeah, but game designers could choose any tool they wanted. So I use Godot.
Awesome.
Another guy used Flash. Um, Another guy who used like some engine that I can remember because it's like pretty obscure. But basically, as long as we could explain how it worked. But sometimes I had to show like technical stuff because then I tried the game in Unity, and it will be super awful to play. And then I see the colliders, and the colliders have the same size as the object, and it's like, no, but look at, like, this is my finger, and remember we're talking about kids that are really small, so like make a fist and try to move stuff like with a fist, and if you can, that's fine. So like,
That's big
so I
enough
had
then.
to, so in our technical documentation I had stuff like, okay, colliders always like at least twice the bounding box of the object, twice or three times. So that also involved like being smart about detecting which one you had to choose, and all sort of, I don't know, stuff like that. That doesn't is not that obvious, and until you start working with that,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
doesn't work.
Noticing something is a very interesting concept. I
Yeah.
just today I found out about a PR, a pull request on GitHub. Right. So again, to anyone listening who doesn't know, a PR is part of a process where just before a piece of code or a new feature makes it officially into the engine, it first is submitted as a PR. If that is confirmed and approved, it gets merged into the engine. But it can also get put away and just blocked or cancelled. It doesn't really matter. And one of these, just like you said, noticing is one of the biggest aspects of it. But there is this silent enemy of noticing something at the same time, which is just getting used to it, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes the issue is right in front of your eyes, and once you are experienced enough, this is an issue that I noticed a couple of years ago. Once you're experienced enough to actually be able, what is technically wrong, to be able to articulate the issue, to even document the issue properly, by that time, you may have already gotten too used to the issue that you no longer recognize it as an issue. A very cool PR that is super fresh now, and it no, it's not super fresh, but it's been merged in for 4.3. Is, I don't know if you've noticed, but when you're playing a game, Godot's got this super powerful ability that you can change things as the game is running.
Yeah.
If you move anything, it snaps back to the very origin of the world, to the new position that you gave it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's anything in the world, so let's say that you are editing a scene of an enemy, and the enemy has two ear meshes, right? So it's got a body and two big floating ears. Now the enemy is running around in the world, and you move the ear. I think I don't remember specifically what the situation is, but in one of these situations, you move the ear, and the ear goes to the right position, but in the world position or in its local position.
Oh.
right? And it's a thing that I noticed hundreds of times. But over the years, it grew on me as, yeah, it's just one of those things, right? I'll just quickly restart the game, try it again, blah, blah, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. And today I saw that PI and I was like, oh, yeah. It's that thing I forgot about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I think that is also a problem for like the Godot contributors, because they work with the engine all the time, and like they get so used to stuff. Like they know, yeah, of course we have this, of course we can make this, we can fix this using that. So for them everything is kind of obvious, and
Yeah.
it's hard to think about like is this feature intuitive? Are we forcing the users to do this? Or is a pain to do, like, okay, yeah, the users technically can do what they want, but are we providing like the best possible way to do it? And sometimes it's hard to picture that, because you are so used to. It happened to me when some friends started using Godot. They say, okay, how do I do this? And for me, it was like, yeah, but that's free,
Yeah, it's
obvious,
obvious.
and easy. And when they mention it to you, it's like, oh no, and yeah, now I remember that I struggled with it, or like, okay, no, it's not that obvious,
No,
and it could be.
absolutely.
And they say like, but why isn't it like this? And sometimes you try to say like, well, because I don't know, it's been like this for a long time, or I don't know. And then you think like, no, you're right. Like,
You,
yeah, we should fix
Lisandro,
this.
you always say things that remind me of of long-standing issues that I have forgotten about, right? So one of these things exactly is getting 3D particles to do anything, right? So in Unity, you add a 3D particle to your hierarchy, boom. There's an emitter, it's already doing something, particles are dropping, they have a bit of a default settings going on, right? In Godot, 3D particle, you add a 3D particle node, nothing. Okay. You add the emitter, still nothing. You have to add a mesh that it's supposed to be emitting. Now you see mesh, right? Now you do see that mesh being emitted. However, it has no material. So now you need to apply the material. Now, do you apply it as material override or do you apply it on that mesh? To a beginner, all of these are extra steps because this is 3 steps overall, right? And they're not straightforward. When you're creating a particle process material, am I going to be creating a particle process material or a particle shader? Right? If I'm a complete beginner, I have no idea what either of them mean.
Yeah,
Same
it's
same
like
thing for the other thing.
the usual, like I think everyone complains like, how do I create a cube with collisions
Oh
and
yeah,
gravity?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Like I've been asking
yeah.
people
These
for
really simple,
feedback,
straightforward things.
and
I just want to get that in there.
yeah,
In fact,
and
oh,
maybe that's the kind of thing that maybe, I mean, uh
mm,
maybe doing that is like, okay, we have to add like a special menu, and maybe you ask the contributors and they think, okay, well, just create a scene with that and then like reuse it. But for the users, like, you have to already know how to use that,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's not
That's the thing.
necessarily
That's the
the
thing.
most comfortable thing. Like when you're prototyping, you don't want to say, okay, I have to create a new scene, I have to know that it has to be like this or that, a root node, okay, now then I have to add the collision shape, then I have to add the shape, I have to know the resources are shared, so if I duplicate that collision shape node, it will use the same shape, so I then scale it and
Shared
the other one
resources. Oh,
scales.
we have too many topics to talk about. Um, yeah, yes. Now you are making me think that creating an add-on that is basically like a toolbox that makes these basic things that are a pain in the butt to set up a single click operation would be a great idea. Truly, really. Imagine, I don't know how often you set up particles. I use them all the time in my games, right? And if I had a single button and that button would create a default particle setup with unique resources for everything, and then I can go in and change them as I need, it would save me time actually. That's awesome.
Yeah,
We should
that
tell
that
someone like
that's something.
Raphael, you know.
Yeah, because that's something that you also have to, like, if you are working on the editor and people ask you something like that, it's like, okay, we have the editor that like shares basically some of the code with the way things work in runtime. So if I create a particles node, it will basically do the same thing as if I were creating that like in a running project, right? If I do like particles, what's the name of 3D particles dot new, I
That's
create a new
interesting. I
particle
see what
now,
you're
it
saying.
will
I
do
haven't
the
thought
same.
about that.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
now I have to think, okay, if they are doing it in the editor, okay, I have to populate that with default values, or do I show a pop-up and you choose between an empty one and one with default stuff? That's yet another click, another pop-up to create. So I understand that it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not just like add a bunch of menus and that's it. As an add-on, it might be easier because that's a separate thing. So you don't have to think about
I
any
have
shared.
never considered this point of view. Yeah, the fact that you can also do it through code means that if it happens a certain way in editor, the users may create an expectation of how that is going to behave in the game, right? So if in
Yeah,
the
and you also have
editor,
to handle it in code. You have to handle the
absolutely,
different use case. Like the editor has to do one
absolutely,
thing, and if I do it through GScript, it has to work in a different way. And you also have to tell users it's
yeah,
gonna work in a different ways, because you don't want, if users want to create like a particle emitter, you don't want to create the emitter with a bunch of resources that you will have to remove and remove from memory. So you also have like performance concerns to think about. So okay, we want particles to work one way when we in runtime, and yeah, another way in the editor, but we also want that to be comfortable for the user. So it is a difficult problem to solve. I give that to
um,
to the
yeah.
Godot team.
Clearly, either it's going to be an add-on, or where you are adding a new node. There are two categories, right? Bare bone nodes or template nodes, right? You know, if something like that could be added,
Yeah,
then
it could probably be something like that.
you know, so that you always get the bare bones implementation all the time, just like you do now. But there's also the option of just give me a cube, please, with collisions. Yeah, something
Yeah,
like those lines. But yeah, but regardless,
yeah.
I have immensely
I'm
enjoyed
thinking,
this, by the way.
I'm thinking now, like you create and like add a new node, and it has
Mm,
like a template section,
yeah,
right? So in the same way that you can say, okay, create a new, I don't know, rigid body, you also have like a create a new ball with physics, and you have
absolutely.
that as a template, and it already shows you like, okay, it's the rigid body
Yeah,
with
yeah,
all of the tree,
yes,
and
yes,
you just like click from there. It also gets saved as a favorite. Like that could
absolutely.
work.
And now
Now that you mention it,
imagine
that could
if
work.
you, and I think that this could be, in fact, I think this could be even educational, because if you click on a ball, right, you just want to get ball with physics, right? It would also show you what components it has, what it's created, what it's made up of. So a person looking into how to use Godot, how to create a rigid body cube, would find out through this, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you also need to know exactly how you have to arrange everything, because Godot is really flexible.
it is super
That's
flexible.
sometimes people ask me, okay, how do I create, like, I want an area that triggers something. Do I put the sprite inside the area or the area inside the sprite? And it's like, well, you can do both, and they have different like advantages and disadvantages. So
Yeah,
tell me a bit more. uh, it's hard because if you're a beginner, like you want the right way, the one way to do things, because it's
but there is
confusing if
no
you have
one
to.
right way.
And yeah, it's hard to be flexible and at the same time like provide like you don't want the engine to tell you you have to do it this way,
Yeah,
because you're also telling
yeah,
users, okay, this is the only way it works. But I guess for a beginner, it's like, okay, I need a cube. Like, here you have a cube.
yeah.
Once you're more familiar with the engine, you'll know that you can do it in a different way. So yeah.
There would be, even a little piece of information, which is just remember this is not the only way you can do this, but it's just a template that we're giving you, a preset that we're giving you for these quick things. Like imagine just having a single button for a bean character, right? When you're prototyping, you always do a character body, which is a character body with a bean collision and a cylinder, and what is it called? A capsule, right? Capsule mesh,
Yeah.
capsule collision shape. You always do that, always, every single time. You never go around that. I like this idea. Shall we write a proposal? I think this could be a very cool proposal.
Yeah, probably.
Or maybe we just have to create an add-on. Guy is really good at add-ons. Maybe if we tell him, he could do that.
Yeah, I guess even a nice mock-up, like you could convince people that, okay, like at least you're showing like this is how we could make it work, and that's already a lot. If you show a way to make it work, that doesn't mean like rewriting half the engine. I think that is great to show like the path forward.
Yeah. I am now looking at the interface of creating a new node. I know. I think there could be a tab. I know people don't like tabs, but I think there could be a tab. Or maybe it would be one of the drop downs, right? Instead of node, there would be presets. No, not instead. Underneath node, there'd be presets or something. Wild.
Yeah. Then people are gonna want to have like being able to have user presets, right? So.
Oh, absolutely. And that is a super powerful thing. You can take any seed and create it and turn it into a user preset.
Yeah.
Godot's going to be so cool thanks to us. Okay. Anyways, Lisandro, I have immensely enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for doing this special episode about Godot. Where can people follow you?
They can follow me on Twitter and Mastodon. I don't post that off, but yeah, at Red Mage Games. That's the one I usually use for like game related stuff. And yeah, mostly there, like for game related stuff, mostly there, or LinkedIn. If they want to add me on LinkedIn, I'm really happy to have anyone in the industry or wanting to work in the industry as a contact and help with anything I can.
It's fantastic. All right. Well, again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.